close my eyes and see.
Spoilers, the following video is mostly intended for humor. I nitpick, make jokes, and generally just have fun pointing out things that don't quite add up. That said, I may make a few actually valid points along the way. I'll leave it to you to decide which is which. Welcome to the channel, I'm Hayes. I talk movies all day, so subscribe right now if you want to be entertained. And today, I want to talk about Snow White, the 2025 live-action Disney remake that caused so much anger and outrage during its cinema run, it became the #1 most streamed movie on Disney+. So how this works is I'm going to go through the movie and point out all the interesting things that I can find in Snow White. So the film starts off with one of the biggest, yet probably most unnoticed changes from the 1937 animated film, and that is, they didn't get rid of Snow White's mother before the film started. Now, speaking of changes from the animated movie, I'm aware of the controversy that kicked off around some of the casting choices, but what you might not know that the 1937 animated movie is not the original version of Snow White. Neither is the 1857 Brothers Grimm publication, and neither is the 1812 Brothers Grimm publication. You see, Snow White is a folktale that has had multiple versions told by multiple people from multiple parts of the world. One of the earliest known versions was by Italian poet and fairytale collector Giambattista Basile called The Young Slave in 1634, where the Snow White character is called Lisa, and the jealous evil queen character was Lisa's auntie. So basically, people have been making up their own versions of other people's stories for hundreds, probably even thousands of years, which means by now there's really no point complaining about one movie that did what literally everyone else has done before it. Many of the songs written for this movie were written by Benj Pasek, Justin Paul, and Jack Feldman. In particular, Benj Pasek and Justin Paul are amongst only 21 people who have ever achieved EGOT status, meaning they've won at the Emmys, Grammys, Oscars, and Tony Awards. Anyway, the king says in the song that they plant a tender seed, trusting something good will grow. Now, a tender seed, or tender plant, is a seed that would struggle to grow during the winter. And considering he also said the air is filled with magic and light, and it looks pretty sunny where they are right now, this tracks. Though of course that's most likely a metaphor for doing good things no matter how small, with the hope that all the little good things would one day turn into a big good thing. Or as the 20th century poet Louise Fries once said, also, sticking your fingers in foods like that is so unhygienic. But here's the thing, this is set somewhere around medieval times when cleanliness around food was very expected, especially from high society, which means his hands are probably pretty clean. So as long as he doesn't stick his fingers back into the food, it's probably fine. Except for the fact somebody's gonna get less than they're supposed to, and that's just not fair now, is it? Anyway, after Queen White dies, King White remarries. They don't say what the time between Old Ting and New Ting was, but considering Snow White is still a child, I think it's safe to assume it's not very long, maybe a few months, 1 year max. Now if you're thinking, wow, that's fast, that's cause you ain't got no riz. Also, remarrying quickly was common during the Middle Ages, especially for a king with no male heir. So I'm sure the good king cared a lot for his daughter, but dude was not actually trying to leave the kingdom to her. Also, the actress who plays the good queen, her name is Lorena Andrea, and this movie is her second appearance in the live-action Disney remake of an old fairy tale. So here's another change from the 1937 version. In the animated movie, fairest of them all pretty much meant the whitest of them all, but maybe not quite in the way you're thinking. You see, back in the olden days, women with lighter skin tones were considered a higher status because it meant they weren't out working in the sun all day getting tanned, and as such, lighter or fairer skin became a symbol of beauty and desirability. So basically, back then, men wanted lazy, useless bitches that didn't do nothing all day. This is actually a really cool transitional scene that lets you know a significant amount of time has passed without being super blatant about it. Now that said, they don't actually say exactly how much time has passed, but I think a reasonable guess would be around 12 years. Let's say at least 10. 10 years has passed, and at no point did Snow White figure out that mopping the stone ground outside a castle is a terrible idea. Go get a broom. Also, the word mop or map didn't come into use until around 1496, so depending on when this is set, it's possible mops would have been around, but they might have been called something else. And if you ever wanted to know who to thank for the ability to easily squeeze the excess water out of a mop head and for detachable mop handles, it's this guy, Thomas Stewart.
My friends are hungry. I'm hungry. That's my excuse.
Maybe I can speak with the Queen.
Why would you think that? I mean, I know Snow White is supposed to be innocent and pure-hearted, but is she naive too? It's been 10 years, come on! So somehow Jonathan got into the castle with no issues, but when it comes to the escape, the most important part, so he can actually give the food to his friends, he fumbles the bag. How is he the boss and he can't even get past the guy with no sense of direction? I mean, look at this guy, has no clue where he's supposed to be going, little girl Snow White had to yank the food off him, and this is the guy who catches you?
The girl I meant to be.
Rachel Zegler is an amazing singer. Okay, so maybe I'm being just a little bit too nitpicky here, but that knot did not look like it was tied all that tight. I mean, Snow White basically just unwrapped it. Also, are you really telling me all Snow White can get is a half-eaten bread roll? Anyway, we're at the part where the evil queen sends the huntsman to kill Snow White in the woods, and of course she sends Mr. No Direction, so it's pot luck if he even finds the woods. But here's the thing, the evil queen can do evil magic, so why not just magic Snow White to death? This film could have been like 20 minutes, max. Matter of fact, if apples grow in the woods, why is Jonathan breaking into the castle to steal food? They've got immediate access to plenty of food right there. I mean, look, I ain't trying to excuse the evil queen's evilness, but let's keep it real. If you can't even pick apples, you're a waste man. Anyway, this scene is done well. Snow White is scared but doesn't budge while the huntsman points the knife at her. Perhaps because she can see the huntsman is scared too and doesn't really want to do this, or you know, because of her bravery deep within that would become apparent by the end of the movie. The never-ending story did it better. Here's the thing though, where did that piece of bread come from? Snow White was out picking apples. Oh, wait a minute, I get it. When Snow White gave Jonathan half a bread roll, she must have kept part of it for herself. So, did Snow White anticipate the evil queen attempting to have her killed? Or is Snow White just already in the habit of stealing food? Because if she was already stealing food, then she had no business trying to lecture Jonathan. And if she anticipated the evil queen trying to kill her, should have taken more food. But I will say this, I do like the fact that Snow White pulls the bread piece out of her non-existent pocket. Whoever made this movie is obviously a Zelda fan.
Hi-ho!
Damn, I thought this was a kids movie, what the hell? So the work that the dwarves are off to do is going underground and using their magic hands to create or summon diamonds which they then dig up. And then somewhere along the lines, those diamonds end up in the evil queen's possession. Okay, but why are they digging up diamonds? Are they secretly working for the evil queen? Or do the diamonds serve some other purpose? Cause that's kind of a gap. Also, they don't say where this movie is set, but since it's at least partly based on the Brothers Grimm version, let's assume Germany. So diamonds form naturally deep under the surface through intense heat and immense pressure. They are then brought to the surface, or at least closer to the surface, by volcanic eruptions. Now here's where it gets interesting. The first record of diamonds is from India about 2,500 years ago, but the last volcanic eruption in Germany was 13,000 years ago. Furthermore, about 15 million years ago, Germany was hit by a meteor which created a crater now known as the Nordlinger Ries. That impact also created an estimated 72,000 tons of diamonds. So all that to say this, diamonds certainly existed in Germany for a long time, but evidently either nobody knew what they were or nobody cared what they were, and definitely nobody bothered to write them down. Moral of the story? Always keep notes. Also, speaking of being a kids movie, this movie might be giving children unrealistic expectations of what happens when you enter somebody else's house without permission and go to sleep in their bed. The animated Snow White broke into their house and slept in their beds too, but at least she cleaned the place first, which, to be clear, is still a problem, but a lot less disrespectful. This is Snow White, not Goldilocks. Anyway, let's address the computer-generated elephant in the room. So one of the big controversies of this film was that it used CGI dwarves dwarves rather than hiring real actors. And I get it, even though one of the dwarves was voiced by Martin Kleber, who has dwarfism, the end result is still less visibility for actors who don't often get a lot of visibility. Now me personally, I felt like I would have preferred they use real actors as well, especially considering it's supposed to be a live action remake. But to be fair, as creatives, they absolutely have the right to go with whatever aesthetic they think works best for the story and atmosphere they're trying to create. Now that said, if Disney's goal was to avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, they absolutely failed. I mean, the dwarves look, act, and dress pretty much exactly the same. They have the same job, they serve mostly the same purpose in the movie. The only real differences are now they have magic hands and have a bit more dialogue. But then they took their name out of the title of the film, so I don't know, you tell me if that makes it better or not.
Seems we've hit a little hiccup.
Because his name is Dopey doesn't mean he's actually a dope.
Of course, that's the reason.
Anyway, Grumpy suggests that they got their names because of their personalities, which is actually true. Pre-Disney, the only time that the dwarves had names was in the 1912 Broadway production, where they were called Blick, Flick, Glick, Snick, Click, Wick, and Quee. But when the Disney boys were making their movie, they wanted the dwarves to have distinct personalities, and after that, they wanted names that reflected those personalities. And after a long list of considerations, they settled on Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, Dopey, and Doc.
Put your lips together, place your tongue behind your teeth, and whistle.
I don't know who needs to hear this, but you can't explain how to do something by telling them to do the thing they don't know how to do.
They're actually a band of erstwhile actors whose sustenance was made unstable by the Queen's greedy economic policies.
Wait, so Jonathan is an out-of-work stage performer? Okay, so assuming this is set in Germany, Germany had what was called the Wunderbühne, or the traveling theatre, where actors, comedians, and other performers would be paid by their organizer, the Principal. Now, Jonathan is their leader. They don't say his age, but let's say he's about 34 right now. The Evil Queen has been ruling for at least 10 years, which means Jonathan would have been a 24-year-old Principal. It's not impossible, but considering the amount of responsibility and theatre experience that Principal would need, it's also not very likely, unless Jonathan comes from a rich family that financed his theatre career. And maybe, even though he effectively bought his way to the top, his kind heart, good nature, and commitment to his troupe meant his actors stayed loyal to him even after the Evil Queen started evil queening. And if that's true, that would definitely fit into Disney's tradition of princes and princesses. However, that is all assuming we're talking later Middle Ages, because the Wunderbühne really was actually after the Middle Ages. Now, if we're talking old school Middle Ages, all I could find on that was a Reddit post saying ancient Rome ranked actors alongside prostitutes in society. And even though there was no source provided, I believe it. I mean, both jobs involve pretending to be someone else for other people's pleasure, so... Anyway, when Jonathan nicks the necklace of Snow White, wouldn't that have broken the clasp? Also, this whole Princess Problem song seems a bit pointless to me. I mean, he's basically diminishing her issues as not that important because he's got to deal with the situation as is. But Snow White's whole goal is to solve that same issue from the root cause. So yeah, it is a princess problem, which is why the princess is dealing with it. And if she manages to successfully deal with it, Jonathan wouldn't have to steal from the castle anymore and can go back to doing short comedy movies or whatever he was doing before the Evil Queen messed things up. And FYI, you can absolutely fix the world by baking apple pies. If every time you wanted to start a fight or a war, you just baked apple pies instead, the world would be a much better place. By the way, kind of a side note, the term American as apple pie is actually inaccurate. The first recorded recipe for apple pie was from 1381 in England. And now we know this is sometime after 1381. And with Maple in the group of erstwhile actors, that now possibly puts this after 1660 if it is set in Germany, because women were not allowed on stage until after the Restoration era in 1660. Although it could be before 1660 if Jonathan was letting Maple perform at risk to his own career and possibly risk to family funding. And if he was, that would be another good reason for Maple to stick with him throughout the Evil Queen's reign. Now, speaking of discrimination, let's address the thing. Because it's commonly believed that the only black people in Europe during the Middle Ages were slaves, and that's not true. For one thing, that didn't happen until the 1450s, which would have been towards the end of the Middle Ages, and B, black people have been in Europe for at least 6,000 years, maybe even up to 40,000 years, which means at least some of you racist people out there, you got a little seasoning in you. But no, you still can't say it. Anyway, before 1450, some black people would have been slaves. However, slavery wasn't based on race at that time. It was based more on your social class, whether you're a prisoner of war, criminal, that sort of thing. And since Maple and Bingley were actors who were able to make a stable income, they probably were not slaves. But if they were slaves and Jonathan ended their enslavement and then hides them as actors for his stage shows, well, that's just another reason to be sticking with this guy. By the way, if you're wondering how a bunch of out-of-work actors can hold their own in the fights with the palace guards, there's two reasons for that. One, actors during this time would have had to learn sword and combat skills, as reenacting A Knight's Tale was a common thing. And B, the palace guards used to be farmers. So here's another reason to assume this is set in Germany. During the Middle Ages, the King of Germany and the King of Italy were sometimes two different people, but often they were the same person, known as Emperor of the Romans. But even still, they were two different kingdoms. Now, with Germany being here and Italy being here, for Jonathan to say Southern Kingdom means they're more likely to be here. Also, I've been saying Germany because that's what we call it now, but back then it would have been called Germania, the Holy Roman Empire.
See, unlike you, I know her.
I think you mean new.
No, he was right. Since he does currently know her, the use of present tense was correct in this case. Also, if the antidote for the sleep and death spell is a true love's kiss, do you have to go with the sleep and death spell? Why not explore other options that don't have unpredictable antidotes? Did you not see Frozen? Actually, to be fair, this was before Frozen, so alright, fine. So here's another change from the animated movie that I don't think anybody noticed. You see, in the animated version, the prince was basically obsessed with a 14-year-old girl he barely knew and searched far and wide until he found her dead body. Well, in this version, Jonathan finds Snow White because he follows the birds. Also, this guy could have kissed her anywhere, her hand, her forehead, her cheek. Any of those places would have been far less creepy and still would have broken the spell. Just goes to show, just because somebody is a good, kind principal to their band of actors, don't mean they won't take advantage of you when you're under the influence. This is supposed to be the more progressive version and you still had a guy violate her personal boundaries. But to be fair, this was probably a common practice during those times.
Let her try.
Clerks did it better. Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace did it better. Can't lie though, this scene is pretty cool, especially the realization that all the reasons Snow White wanted to find her father were qualities she had in herself all along. My only question is, where did she get that hood? Because if you remember, Little Red Riding Hood got eaten by the big bad wolf, saved by the woodsman, and then after that, apparently goes home and lives happily ever after? But did she? Did she really live happily ever after? Or did Little Red have a run-in with Big White? Also, it's cool that the gods finally remembered who they are, but why did it take 10 years? Like at no point during the last decade, Matthew was like, man, I just want to invent pizza before the Southern Kingdom. Anyway, the movie ends with the evil queen getting 7 years bad luck and Snow White's becoming the new evil queen and forcing everybody to wear white. But here's the thing, the evil queen gets told once again she ain't shit by the magic mirror, but this time the mirror says it's because Snow White's beauty comes from within. She'd always be fairer than thee. Okay, cool, but shouldn't the magic mirror have said that before? Like way before, from whenever the evil queen first met the magic mirror? Should have told her from then that inner beauty beats outer beauty any day of the week and twice on Sundays. This movie did not need to happen. But that's what I think of Snow White. What do you think of Snow White? Let me know down below, and while you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a suggestion if you don't mind.